it works. All right. We are live.
Woo-hoo.
We're here. It's on. It's happening. We'll obviously people will join. This will take them a moment to tune in, as they say. Call in, phone in. So yeah, in the meantime, while people are doing that, I can obviously introduce our esteemed guest. Yes, esteemed all the way today from Oak Island, Oak Beach, New York. Also a resident of Brooklyn, soon to be Manhattan again.
Yep.
You've been a New York local for many years now. You've been a designer for even more years than that. I've definitely been able to catch up with you and chat design in the past. You've worked a whole range of notable places. I think some of the ones that immediately spring to mind is Firstborn, Ueno, a great studio as well. Ueno, I'm not even sure on the pronunciation.
That works.
Ueno. Which like then became Twitter for a period there. Twitter to Slice, a great New York kind of success story in its own right, I think, that company and the product that they've built. And now a partner heading up design for Siberia, which is a design studio here or a design agency here in New York as well, but with a bit of a distributed team.
Yeah, we're fully distributed.
In
this incarnation of Siberia.
Love that. I think one unique thing about yourself, Dave, throughout all of that is, for many years you've been a design leader operating as a director and above, calling shots, leading, guiding, interfacing with execs, very high level on that front. But it's also been, some of your responsibility, but something that just seems to be in your blood, which is designing. You're in Figma, you're pushing pixels, you'll do elements of that. I think you have a great opinion about what great design is, which I really love. So yeah, I've often found that to be a little bit unique about yourself. So I'm personally very stoked for you to be here. Hopefully everyone else is too. But yeah, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for the kind intro. Those are all true statements.
Excellent.
Nice. I don't know if my opinions are always good, but
okay, you've got one.
Yeah.
Or two.
Yeah, maybe many.
I love that. Well, as always, we love to sort of fire up with some questions to get people talking as well and get people commenting and things like that. We have noticed over these streams, this is our 14th one, isn't it? Mm-hmm. That a lot of people meet each other in the comments. It seems meet each other, connect with each other, answer each other's questions in some ways. I know other designers have then become connected after they've met each other in the comment section of this stream. So yeah, please, as always, feel free to fire it out, to be active, to drop your comments. We always love hearing where people are calling in from. Where are you calling in from?
Where are you calling in from?
Yeah. So definitely feel free to drop a comment and share if you're phoning in, you're watching from somewhere. We've had some far-flung places over the time, haven't we? We've had all parts of US.
Yeah, Eastern Europe, like Pakistan.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Sam's here. G'day, Sam.
Nice.
Yeah, there's been NYC. All right, that's good. We're local straight up.
Yeah.
Boom. Yeah, I especially like hearing from international designers, obviously, too. It's cool to get those other perspectives from people around the world when they can jump in.
I'm actually going to do a podcast this Friday, and the podcaster has been watching Design Unfiltered, and he's like, hey, like, what if we did video? Like, I think I like the video format and it's like more live, more interactions. So I think this is such a unique place to like actually exchange ideas in real time. And as you're filtering in and telling us where you're from, also think of questions of what you want to ask Dave. You've got this really big, beautiful, creative brain amongst us here. And also, me and Erica and Jared are all, experienced UX design recruiters. We've been doing this for many, many years, so we can also weigh in. So, your questions could be for all of us. But yeah, that's what I love so much about Design Unfiltered, is that it's like that live, like everybody's interacting and exchanging ideas in the chat. And so we really encourage people to, share questions, ideas, but also crosstalk with each other. It's all welcome.
Definitely. And I think some of our idea when we kicked this off was creating like a place where people could access someone like yourself, Dave, as well for a moment of questions or getting insights, things like that. It can be really hard. A design leader like yourself or anyone, everyone's got their busy schedules, and getting all those questions one-to-one from people one at a time, it can be hard to respond to everyone all the time. But this, in a way, is almost like office hours. We're here, we're present, fire it out. If you got it, this is the chance to kind of just jam on it, chat on it, and that's that. And sometimes that might be a way that we can create that access or get those ideas and opinions when, sometimes it's tough to get that from someone's inbox.
You can always DM me on Twitter or whatever we're calling it nowadays. But
I never use Twitter or X. I don't think I've ever used it.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe like I was at South by Southwest when it launched.
Wow.
Wow.
I remember seeing Jack Dorsey. I didn't know it was Jack Dorsey at that time.
Right.
But
Some dude.
Like a little screen in a hallway showing very random tweets back when you had to like sort of SMS it.
Yep.
And I remember saying, this is the stupidest idea.
It'll never take off.
Right. So was the automobile. The automobile was like, what's that? This is
a faster horse.
Yeah, exactly.
It was. But yeah, no, Twitter. I've been on Twitter since the beginning. On it, then off it, and then actually very cool how that phase, that era of digital designers sort of flocked to it. And I've met a lot of my now close friends through the industry by way of DMs.
Wow.
That's how I got a job at Firstborn, actually. I DM'd Firstborn and Michael Ferdman and was like, hey, I've always wanted to work there. Can I work there?
That was it. Your cover letter in 140 characters or less.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's incredible, Dave, because you were there for over 11 years. So that was a very fateful tweet.
One tweet.
Yes.
DM.
Right. And you
timing was impeccable.
Worked your way up. You were the chief creative officer, right? The CCO?
Yeah. Yeah. I started as like the number 2 creative and then there for a few years and won some, I think our first big account was Sobe, part of PepsiCo. Sobe is, I don't even know if Sobe's still around, but that was a really big pitch win. And that was when digital agencies were mostly production shops, like ad agencies came up with the ideas. They'd pay us back then like $600,000 to do like a fancy flash microsite or whatever it was. And we're like, we've got ideas too. And everyone was trying to make that pivot to not just being a production company, but being a proper agency with ideas and all the strategic thinking that went behind it. And obviously the technical chops to build some of these crazy ideas. And so winning Sobe and then Wrigley shortly after, like allowed us to get a lot of attention from like big holding companies and then sold to Dentsu and
Wow. Away you went.
Wow.
Yep.
That's huge.
Wow.
We talked about when we caught up the other week, which I thought was funny. Your LinkedIn lists your first role as a ditch digger.
Yes.
And
I always forget that's on there, but when it gets dug up, nope. I always sort of giggle at it.
Now that was like the first thing I saw in your LinkedIn. I was seeing, all of your experience. And of course that's at the very beginning. I love to see where people came from, like their origin story. Like, how did you get into this business? Like, what's, who are you really?
Yeah, that was just like honestly high school summer jobs working underground construction for the Las Vegas Valley Water District. So ginger in the sun, digging trenches.
You would think HR would have something to say about that, maybe.
Yeah.
Some sort of safety.
Blames on the skin cancer problems I've had.
Or like a full hazmat suit.
Yeah. Wear sunscreen, kids.
Yeah.
So Dave, what do you think that job? I mean, I this is a real question because I started out in like, bartending and waitressing, and we talked about that too. But what do you think digging ditches and like doing manual labor. Like, how do you feel? Did that change you or like give you perspective or like somehow get you on your path to design in a way?
The only way it got me on my path to design was it reminded me that going to college is probably a good idea.
not this.
But it instilled in me like a love for trades, and I have a lot of friends who I met through skate that I've known forever, who've gone on to build really successful construction companies, carpentry, whatever. Restaurants is not a trade, so that is a trade.
Yeah.
And I just think I have a ton of respect for that kind of that world. And you learn a lot about just what real work is and hard work and actually sweating versus, sitting behind our mouse and keyboards in air conditioning, griping about performance review season. Like really is
this the hardest
all
thing
the things that we have to complain about. I don't know. I don't know. It gives you a lot of perspective, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole thrust of Office Space. You guys see that movie Office Space?
Oh yeah.
Where he gets hypnotized and he like climbs the ranks because he doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
And then at the end, he like becomes a construction worker because that's like the apex of what he could be doing with his life. It's just to like do what he wants to do. I love that.
It's part of it.
Oh, that movie is I've watched that movie so many times. We're working in a mail room. When I was in college, I thought like wait 1 year as a finance major, and then realized that marketing and advertising and this new thing called the internet was probably a better route for me. But I remember working in a mail room in a Merrill Lynch, and that movie had just come out, and it was like I was like, oh, I'm living.
This is it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you have somebody ask you, do you have a case of the Mondays?
Yes. I feel like you get that in any kind of large corporate America type kind of situation.
Definitely.
It's like this new language. Yeah.
Maybe that's been part of. I mean, you've worked now too, I suppose, in smaller independent style shops. I think arguably at the time, Twitter was pretty big when you got there. So that's like maybe that biggest sort of corporate, like, different companies to be within, right? Different vibes, I suppose, that you get from it. So maybe do you think you've got an appreciation for one over the other, or just something? I
don't know. Right now, I'm very much enjoying being back in a small studio.
Yeah,
being a partner, actually being able to get my hands dirty. One of the reasons when I went to, how do I tell this story? I like being close to work, and then actually being able to, get lost in a design problem and get into the pixels and getting back to the actual craft side of things. It's funny, it's like as you get more senior in a big agency, first when we got big, we got acquired. Dentsu's 40,000 people. It's a humongous holding company. I don't know what size they are now. I think everything in this industry has contracted. But
we'll fact check it.
Yeah, but and once you become, I guess, CCO, you start drifting pretty far from the work. Your product. Right. I did a lot of the pitching, and that was my connection to the work. Very active. Like I'll make the deck. That was at least my one thing I could still design and write a lot of the words for the deck. So you end up doing a lot more presentations. My writing got really good. But you sort of drift away from the design and certainly the everyday aspects and the problems you run into sort of at that ground level. So as Figma was exploding, I was super far away from this new design software called Figma. I didn't learn that until, much later, actually going to Ueno, which allowed me to get closer to the work, and I was running the Twitter account from a creative standpoint there. And I really sort of liked being able to get back into the weeds, pushing pixels. That's why we all started doing this in the first place. Right?
Yeah, it does get, sometimes I think it seems funny that it gets counterintuitive as a designer. The more senior and more experienced you get, the further away you end up being from the trade or the craft that you studied and learned in the first place in some way. Yeah,
100%. Advertising as an industry, I don't say design writ large, but certainly in the marketing side, the second you have a little bit of success, you're sucked up into a creative director position.
Mm-hmm.
And you have success there, then you're an ECD, and you're just getting pulled further and further away from the thing that you are actually great at. And that sort of got you to that position. And it left me anyway, wanting to, just be back into the problem space and figuring things out.
Yeah.
Totally. I was just gonna say, I remember my old manager, her husband was an ECD, and she used to say that all the time. She was like, all he does now is pitch decks and presentations and like. And
a lot of 100%, and a lot of with no management training, by the way.
Yeah.
So when that happens, and you're sort of all of a sudden you're in charge of these people, and management inside of agencies is radically different than management inside of in-house, where there is structure and training and the ability to pivot between an IC and that. But yeah, for the most part, like ECDs just get sucked up into this position. Here's 10 people or whatever, and figure it out. And I probably leads to a lot of just not fun situations for junior creatives or junior designers in those situations.
Right.
So what are some things that you wish if somebody could have come down from on high and said, Dave, here's the secret to managing at an agency level? What do you wish you would have known then? Or what were some things that you learned? Like what were some, maybe the school of hard knocks that you had to learn along the way?
Being able to have proper career talks with people, and like, what do they want to get out of it? Because and I don't know if you can fix the marketing agency space so much, because it's, if you wanted to move up, you had to work on projects that were successful and maybe won awards if that was a lot of agencies want that kind of thing. And that is how you win a con, guess what? You're going to be a creative director the next year, and then you're on your way to be an ECD, but I've lost my train of thought there. But like, I just wish how can you get people to grow as a designer or whatever the creative space is, without just always having the luck of the draw of working on a winning project or something like awards? How can they continue to become better without sort of the random luck of winning a really major award or just
because that's not the only signal of recognition of a job well done necessarily, is it? You could design an absolutely great campaign in the advertising space. It actually did well for the client. The client got the impact that they wanted, or they were just so happy with it. But just because it didn't win an award feels like maybe it isn't recognized as great work, when for all intents and purposes, it could have been great.
On the
work.
other end of the spectrum, like you have like how people talk about work in the product design sense, which I also think is a little long in the tooth and long-winded, and we're sort of, everyone writes this the same silly case study about how they did some research and looked at quant and qual and came to some insight that's rarely an insight, and then this long essay and narrative to get to, like, we made the button bigger, or we added a new kind of sharing feature, whatever the feature is. It's very small, and it's just like a little bit overly academic.
Yeah.
I wish you could educate people away from that. However, inside of like product design inside of a company, a lot of times that's the thinking that they want, even if it's it's going a little bit too hard on the strategy for something that doesn't need that much.
Right.
That's a great
balance is tricky though, and understanding when you can just solve it. Is it hubris, or is it in that you just think you've got it figured out, and and so you think you're right, versus having the experience to know you're right because you've done it 15 times.
So what is it that you look for in portfolios? Because you're right, Dave. I think we're all trained. Like, this is, you got to show all these artifacts and set up the problem. And I mean, there's a very similar structure to all of them, and how they look and feel, of course, is very different depending on the designer. But if you are kind of wishing for getting away from that sort of structure, what is it that you look for? What to you signals like this person is really great at design?
I want them to be thoughtful about what they did, but not necessarily academic in the way they sort of present it. and again, it depends on what I would be hiring for, right? I to be honest, I'm a very much from like intuition type kind of person. For me, it's there's a personality aspect. I wanted someone with like tenacity who just is excited about solving problems and enthusiastic about it, and is just really sort of interested in problems, whatever they are. So I really look for that kind of the intrigue in the person, you know.
Okay.
Like, are they like? And then of course there's the pixel side, right? Are you just using UI toolkits? You know, can you think it beyond the components that you're given to the design system? You know. Do you know when it's important to detach an instance, if you will, versus like stick to the system? Like, can you weigh the trade-offs of trying to sell in something net new that, you know, I'm not, you know, versus, you know what, this is a small problem. Let's just use the existing system and get some kind of signal out of it. I'm speaking now through a product design lens, right?
Yeah.
But really it comes down to, yes, there's this craft thing, which is just intuition that I have looking at, is the work interesting? Are they solving problems in novel and creative ways, or just doing what the competitor does? Just to say, do the UX best practice. Like, so I want someone who's, just excited about doing work and finding multiple ways of solving problems. The easy, safe way versus like, here's a more potentially compelling way, but the risks of going this way might mean more engineering hours or something else, you know, like, but they can evaluate why they're doing both.
They can think that out. Can I push you a little bit more on like just the visual side for a moment? Because I do think, for example, Ueno had one of the highest bars. I think a lot of the designers there were pretty end to end with their skill sets, but just to isolate some of that visual bar, I think it was extremely high there. I'm happy to say I did hire a couple of freelancers that met that bar over my time there. But and I know it's so instant sometimes. You see someone's book and you go, okay, like, yeah, it looks interesting, especially if it's freelance, right? Which is, we're seeing a lot more freelance work these days. I think that's always the case in agencies too. What are some things that you get from a visual signal that's just like instant yeses, or even the opposite, like an instant no? And you know, we're playing in this high bar. Like,
visually speaking,
like just visual, The
designers at Ueno were insanely talented.
Yeah.
Like to a humbling me type kind of thing. It was like actually cool to be a senior, but to be able to work with them and how fast everyone worked and such a high fidelity of work was like it. They were good.
Yeah, they were. But they tried to hire at times too. You know, they had to hire.
Yeah, they hired a ton of people. I mean, I think when I was there, 60% of the staff was like remote, sort of contractor. You know, and so there was hundreds of 120 some odd people.
Yep.
But what I look for, what was neat about Ueno is I feel like they defined an aesthetic for sort of an era, and certainly the tech space. Like, what Holly and that whole team did, like, was there was an aesthetic that connected a lot of their work. And I honestly, it comes down to like, how would you even describe what you're looking at? There's good spacing, there's rhythm, there's narrative. The words mattered. So as you went down the page, the copy makes sense.
The hierarchy,
interestingly, with the visuals, the content design. So what goes in the square boxes, super strong and thought through, versus just like, oh, I'm working with whatever assets I'm given.
Yep.
It was always like pushing to make those better. And I don't know. So it was like this combination of great visual design and content design.
Yep.
With really smart UI design. And then, you know, the way a lot of my job there was like sort of writing narratives for like how we presented, we call them North Star vision work. And, you know, which is what we were doing with Twitter, or I was doing with Twitter. And the way we presented work was, Holly really made me better, because you're telling stories, and it would be very casual the way we tell these stories, and how the work comes to life along that sort of like journey, your journey, or was pretty awesome. So they did a lot of things really well, and that came from strong strategy.
Had to start there.
Yep.
Yeah, I sometimes think even just assessing that visual bar is like the absence of mistakes sometimes too. Like seeing you could have great typography but bad spacing.
Yep.
Good spacing, odd choice of colors, or and it's like, it just let the whole thing down. Like that great design is only as good as the weakest link sometimes. Yep. And sometimes when I see a great portfolio, I think, what makes this great? And maybe an easier question is like, well, nothing makes this shit. It's all good. So
it really is end to end.
That's kind of sad.
The most important thing you can have on your team is a great design engineer too.
So bring it to life.
Oh my God. Working with some engineers from Your Majesty, actually, right now on this project we're doing for the James Beard Foundation, which is a full end-to-end rebrand for them, and manifesting through, it's the whole rebrand. So there'll be a new website that goes with it, changing the logo, everything, which is sort of cool because we're redoing work that Pentagram did, which is, for me,
it's pretty cool.
Cool.
Awesome.
But we're working with these amazing creative engineers, and they just take so much. It just makes your life so much easier because they bring a level of polish to how things scroll, animate. They're proactive with problem solving and not just like knocking down Jira tickets. Well, you didn't tell me to make it exactly like transition this way. I don't know if I have time to animate it. It was just like proactive with how they solved it. Freaking love it.
Okay.
I think too, Jared, I personally find, I'm sure you guys see this too, but when I know somebody is a great designer, the portfolio speaks for itself. It feels right. I think, Dave, to your point, it intuitively feels good. There is that sense of hierarchy, composition, white space, all those things. But it's really just like the attention to detail in all the types of touch points they have, right? So if I'm getting an email from somebody that is 2 sentences, maybe they drop the name of somebody that we know in common or somebody who referred them. Here's my portfolio. Here's my resume. Here's maybe just a couple bullet points about what I'm looking for. Like bing, bang, boom. It's nice and tidily packaged.
Yep.
Love that, because that's good UX too. That's the design.
I think the best thing that I ever learned was writing.
Right. Yeah.
It really helps. You tell a story, whether it's about yourself or a client, like that. Designers need to learn business and learn how to write. I think would be the Figma skills, of course, but like those are the things that separate folks. And then like you said, Joanna, like the attention to detail. I look at a lot of websites, and a lot of times nowadays, and I'm fine with this, by the way, like people use templates from Squarespace or Frame or whatever. But in downloading that template to put their work into, they forget little things like something in the footer is still from something generic from that template, or like they'll have like the social icons down there, but they go to some generic page that's or the designer of the template that they got, not themselves, and they forget these little details. And it's unless the work inside those boxes is so good, I start to question a lot of did you really do that work? Were you just a cog in the machine and sort of taking credit for this larger thing? In fact, by the time I'm interviewing someone, like I'm really, me personally, like trying to sniff out like what was your actual role in this work, and are you a good fit for how we work wherever that might be. Twitter was different, than and so it's almost like you're getting into a cultural type kind of fit, because if I've said, yes, I want to talk to this person, I've already said their work is really good.
That's already a part of it. fairly satisfied.
Mm-hmm. Are there any questions you asked, Dave, that are specific around like, how do I find out if this person did the work? Because I would personally love to know that for my own process too.
I think it's asking probing questions about like specific pieces within. I asked directly, like, what was your exact role within this work? But then it's like you can probe on what problem were you here. I see this widget. What problem were you solving, and what led to your thinking? And if you can ask like those detailed probing questions, I think you can tell.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things I liked, and this happens at every big tech company, but at Twitter, we had really, and actually I think I want to do this at Siberia, but we had really good and strong rubrics and question lists prepared for when we were hiring. So I was there doing a ton of hiring. I was on the hiring committee, so lots and lots of meetings about reviewing resumes, looking at people's work, interviewing, and all that. But having that strong rubric and that of how you're going to evaluate someone across a spectrum of things, plus having a set of questions that you go back to, and we all ask the same types of questions, allowed us to sort of triangulate on a person and whether or not they're doing good. They did what they did, or they're a great fit for the role, and what's needed. I don't think agencies do that. In fact, I've never seen it in my tenure or heard about it, but having like, this is how we evaluate talent. Here's the questions we ask. This is what a good response looks like. This is what a bad response looks like.
Right.
And one thing that I like doing at Twitter, and I've done that at Slice, and I brought that kind of thinking to Slice. And I would do these live, I call them live crits. So open up. I'm sure there's an app that we both have, which is, let's open it up. And then I have, if this is a product designer, right? Identify a feature that you find interesting. And they don't know which app we're going to be going into, and then walk me through how you think they arrived at that solution and why. And it helps you understand like how they think and what their role maybe has been at other places. And that's actually one of those things that you never see on the agency side, that type of evaluation, I feel like. And I think it's a very valuable tool to see how product designers think.
Do you think that skill set, I think playing devil's advocate on the agency side for a moment, right? It feels like it can be very visual led sometimes, or you do work, you toss it over the fence, that's that. You never iterate. You don't really know. A lot of the time you're working off of a client's brief. You don't really have access to real data, real users. You're just kind of going for it. We've heard all these stigmas, I think, about agency in that regard, whereas product design in-house at a company is a little bit different to that. So digging in on like a crit or something like that in the agency space, will those designers, you want them to have that skill set, but how much will they get to use that skill set in the agency environment these days?
It depends on, again, I guess it depends on what you're hiring for. But you tend to find on the agency side, especially great agencies or great freelancers, whatever, like the level of the pace at which those designers can generate ideas and solutions to a problem is tremendous, and usually at a much higher level of craft than I've seen with a boot camp. Maybe like a product designer came from a boot camp, went straight to in-house, and they've only really worked with not through a design system. So again, very different. Not one is right or wrong, right? It's just you're a product of your environment. But I think that's what I would talk about is like, if you're an agency person looking to go in-house, how they're going to evaluate your work. They're going to be skeptical of you. I heard this all the time it was on the tech company side, right? Like, everyone's skeptical of a high level of craft. They never think that you were that thoughtful. There's a whole bunch of stereotypes and stigmas associated with it. So how you have to position yourself and why and how you came up to that to those solutions is very different. And then also, say you get through the gauntlet of the interview process and you make it in-house, you're not gonna have the support of a producer. You're setting your own calendars. You don't. A product manager is not a project manager, and expectations are very different. They're gonna have very strong opinions on what you should make and why. And so, and you're going to be in a much more political, hierarchical type environment that is just very different. Whereas in-house folks coming to an agency side are not going to be ready for the pace at which they work, the ambiguity at which they have to make decisions, the number of options that they need to sort of explore before arriving at one. It is totally different. And then constantly working at a super high level of craft.
Yeah. It sounds like, go on.
Is there a way for people, if they know that they would like to try to go to the other side, to prepare for that?
Sorry, what was that again?
Like, it's always difficult to sort of switch from agency to in-house, et cetera. But if somebody really wants to have both experiences in their career, is there a way that they can start preparing, a year or two? Like, how do they figure out the speed or ask for more work or certain types of projects so that they can
do the transition?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think you should do both. You learn a ton going back and forth between the two. And so I think that the combination of thinking is super critical. It'll make you stronger as a designer. How you would prepare, I mean, if you're young and still have the energy, like hustles and like doing some freelance just so you have that variety of work. Working with working with clients. I mean, this is going to be a completely different kind of situation than working for your squad.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to give you the variety. If you're coming from in-house and you've only ever worked there and coming do your own design exercises and you're going to be solving much bigger end-to-end chunks versus just how can we optimize this particular action. It's going to be much more about an end-to-end journey, an entire product detail page versus just optimizing where the buy now button is, to oversimplify it.
Yeah. I
think Alan, I'm going to butcher his last name there, Rava, has a good point. Like, startups allow you to do work in that faster paced environment, for sure. Especially if it's a true startup,
right.
In that the engineers are moving at like light speed and you can solve big chunks and you're pivoting a lot. Like that's actually great training for the closest parallel to maybe agency.
Yeah. What do you think? I feel like a lot of designers who are in agency want to go in-house, or maybe they've only had agency experience. They really want to get in-house, but I don't always see it coming back as much, going from I've been in-house, now I really want to be in agency. What would be some of your sell?
The sell. Oh, sorry. I think you're asking why. The reason why is like, there's
build your
more money if you're at a big tech company. I think things are softening. I was there sort of peak ZIRP, zero interest rate phenomena era. Like, it was like super bloated and I used to quip all the time back in my firstborn days about when tech was exploding and hiring everyone away from agencies, was like they're not staffing themselves for what their product needs. They're staffing themselves for what their valuation requires.
Yeah.
And sort of drove me crazy, but it is what it is. They took a lot of talent, and those folks who landed there and got used to that kind of culture, for they're all millionaires. I made a lot of money, and so coming from a big tech to an agency where your total compensation is going to go down, I think, you're right. It's going to be way more rare.
It's a tougher sell
because you have to want something pretty different.
But I think it sounds like what you're describing a little bit of, though, going into that agency environment can really offer you a lot as a designer. It can make you a better designer. If you've never been in an agency before, it could give you a shot at, or you shouldn't just stigmatize it because you think, oh, I don't want to be an agency. I'm an in-house designer. It's like, well, do you want to learn to design at speed? Do you want to design with a bigger breadth of work? Do you want to?
And you get to work with like a wide range of brands, all doing very different, or companies. I mean, like doing very different things that require different. Like that's coming back. I love the variety. I'm working on this big thing for Ford right now.
Yep.
On this in development, like
exclusive. You heard it here first.
Pivot for this one division of what they're doing. It's cool.
Yep.
And then, on the other end is like a complete rebrand of James Beard Foundation stuff. And and as a food person who's worked in kitchen, like that's as cool as it gets for me. And it's like, I love the variety,
Right. Do you find yourself personally, it's just a side question, I suppose, personally getting into these things that you design for when it does tap into one of your personal interests too, like cooking? I know you're a bit of a foodie. Yeah. Are you feeling a bit more jazzed on that versus, maybe working on like an insurance rebrand? I don't know if you're passionate about insurance.
I'm about to start on something that's Medicare related. But yeah, like I said, it's just the point I am in my career. It doesn't bother me. Like when I was younger, you want to work on the cool brands and cool stuff, and just because it's cool to say you did something for insert cool brand, right? But it doesn't bother me as much anymore. I'm sort of like, but yeah, if you resonate with it, it does feel cool.
Good.
It also makes your conviction about stuff, I don't know, make you get pretty particular.
Yeah. Which, I think maybe a client ultimately could benefit from, right? That this
I think they like that a lot when they see that you've been there and solved that problem, or really are passionate about that space. That clients love that kind of thing, of course.
Yeah.
I once spoke to somebody who had opened their own restaurant overseas and then became a product designer or a researcher at, I think, DoorDash or something, right? When they were starting. It was like awesome because they totally understood like the restaurant side.
Yep.
And what the customers wanted too. So
100% helps you empathize with
the
problems.
You've been there.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a little bit more about this storytelling aspect, because it seems like you learned a ton about it, and it's kind of, I think on the surface, it's not necessarily a skill. Maybe you've taught it to some of your designers over the years. Like, where do you get started in improving your writing, your storytelling, which is your communication?
I can't remember if it was like Crispin, Porter, and Bogusky who started the whole thing, but that idea of when creatives there would write up their idea, they had a pretty strict format, and it was about it was basically the press release. Like because their whole thing was about generating buzz. So how are people going to write about the idea? So you're going to go sum up your idea by the form of a headline and a brief sort of.
Yeah.
That was maybe the first like insight, like, oh, that's interesting. And then getting to this, there was this other, oh man, Ronald, I'm spacing his last name. Dang. He was one of the ECDs or VP of super senior creative. Dentsu on the Isobar side, but he was really great about writing the case study video or award submission video. He was a big award, like early. And like that helps you
before it was done.
Like helps you crystallize as best you can. You never actually get there, but like it helps you really sort of sharpen and distill your thinking into something fairly concise. And then it's just a matter of breaking it out narratively and telling that story, and everything sort of builds to a moment.
Do you think that this skill set was helpful for you in-house? And like, it sounds in the agency space, I get it, you're pitching to clients, but in-house, you've got to sell these ideas to someone else to
100%
fund, right? Yeah,
100%. Especially if you're doing, whether you're starting a new group within the organization, you need to be able to roadshow yourself or your team and why you're doing what you're doing. Like, your initiative is this, and it's important because all of these reasons, and how you tell that story is super important. You get this
Yeah.
combination of visuals, and so in words and anecdotes. I think that all is super important in-house too.
Yeah.
If you're doing vision work in-house, a lot of times you have this vision deck that you have, but you've got to go get the buy-in from all of these different teams.
Yep.
Eventually the executive team, so then you've got a place within their roadmap. Otherwise, you could have this great idea that no one knows about, and you haven't convinced them because they don't have to do it. Like there's a lot of great work that Ueno did that got put great work that just sold through to Jack Dorsey and all the other heads of design and engineering and product. Those internal teams took it, go, thank you very much. We're going to put it on the shelf and we'll use it as a point of input. And when we have time, we'll figure out the solution on our own.
We'll get to that.
And so millions of dollars of work got done that just got put on a shelf.
Wow.
And you see that happen even with like 0-1 teams inside in-house. Like a lot of that work then tries to roll out of the 0-1 team into the teams and the squads implementing it. And they're sort of like, no, fuck you.
We ain't doing this.
I don't want to do this. I want to do it this way. And a lot of times it just comes down to like that achieves something that isn't a goal that I'm tied to. So why would I solve it? Because the goal I need to solve the goals that I'm tied to that we write 6 months in advance. Otherwise, I don't get my promotion, my bonus, my whatever.
Sounds like ego at that point, isn't it?
Well, it's about. I mean,
stay relevant in your job.
Is metrics on goals that are written at the beginning of the year.
Yeah,
and you got to hit those marks, and if you don't, like you're not getting you and your team are not gonna. Win, Yeah. That kind of stuff. That's the stuff that sours me, like on just like the over OKRing of really everything. It's not really about great work or interesting solutions. It's,
well, with
working towards, and I get it. You're working towards getting your bonus.
Yeah. I think with that though too, did you ever see the amazing power of storytelling used for evil, in that there were teams that were able to communicate these ideas, which ultimately the ideas might have been kind of dog shit, but because they sold them so well, everyone bought into them and did them. And you're like, has anyone actually looked under the hood of this thing? It's terrible.
Yeah, it's like
it's a lot of right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's more obvious to see like Super Bowl ads, right? Like these terrible ideas. Like there's like huge budgets, terrible ideas. It's like there's not even
But someone can sell them, I guess, somewhere, right? They have that. They took that power of storytelling one step too far, and look what they've done. Made a fucking Super Bowl ad.
Yeah. I've sold through some really terrible ideas in my past, so I get it.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, kudos to you that you could do it. And that's a skill. It's not always used for good. By the way, sorry I dropped off for so long, guys. I love living in the country, but sometimes the Wi-Fi is a little dodgy. So sorry about that. I'll watch the archive.
Where's your Starlink? Where's Dave? Call your mate Elon.
I'm so happy I avoided that whole thing.
That was around about timing that you would have wrapped up there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what an interesting time. What a good experience.
Can I ask a question? So we always like to, or we're starting to ask this question, but I wanted to know if there's like any design books that are your favorite, or what's on your shelf. Like I don't know if you're a reader or not, but anything you can recommend.
Yeah. So at the place in Greenpoint, my desk is, in my library, and I have tons of design books. I just like any of the classic. Where do I even start with this? I love all the work that is it Guidelines. They have a little shop in Greenpoint, little design studio, and they make books about guidelines, and I'm totally spacing it right now.
Oh, not on West Street, down on West.
Not on Frank.
It's on Franklin, is it?
Anyway, a standards manual. They come out with a ton of cool books because they find all these old standard manuals and then republish those. And I think the thought that went into that kind of stuff is always fun just to like page through.
Yeah.
any of the old books on grids. I used to be a real big grid and grouchy type kind of person. So anything, getting it. I think digital designers need to spend more time going back and looking at old books. And then for a long period of time, I still like reading them. There's this book that Michael Beirut from Pentagram creates. It's a design. It's basically a book of graphic design essays.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And there's tons of volumes of them. And I think the writing in there is super interesting because it comes from designers from a wide spectrum of industries and spaces and disciplines. And then when you're reading essays from a graphic designer, and it's like critical writing, like it's super nerdy type stuff, but on graphic design, talking about whatever that problem space is. And it's, even if it's like 1986, 1970s, whatever, it's still like the same thing we're talking about now, and the same problems with clients or, corporate politics and its influence on design. So, there's an analog to every digital thing. And I think if you go back and read those old books and essays, I don't know, it's just a different era. Now we just, myself included, spout off on Twitter.
I love that. Thank you.
Do your essays at, only minimal characters. That's
Do you think there's
interesting.
things that people did better in design back in the 60s and 70s than they do now?
Ooh.
I personally like the music posters from back then a little better.
Yeah, I mean, they're so like indicative of time and place,
Books on posters, like, especially from like, going way back to like the Swiss type movement and all that kind of stuff. We're not doing anything new. We just, it was done on a poster in like 1928 in Switzerland, like, what do they do better? I think there's still plenty of passionate people in the space. But I think it was a little bit more of a protected space. Now everyone wants it was like it was a craft type thing, almost like you'd going way back, apprentice people,
apprentice graphic designer or draftsperson.
You certainly, you certainly weren't doing it for the money back then, and so
I'm reading a great book on Julia Morgan, the famous architect from the Bay Area. And there was, that was what you did. You apprenticed when you were young. But a lot of those people that were apprentices were very well connected. They were actually very, very wealthy people, right? So they only got into, I think it was the Beaux-Arts in France in the turn of the century, if you had the right connections. And then it was this crazy test to get in. So it only took a very select few. It was very high end.
Yeah, going back to there were schools on thinking, whether the Bauhaus was that way. I'm spacing one of the international typographic style group was called, but you bought into a dogma on grids and why you use them, and that's all you did. And it was like a little culty religious-y. It wasn't religious-y, but there was this cult type dogma to it that it's a little spooky, but very regimented thinking. It was their lens, and this is what I stand for, and this is how we design around this period.
It sounds inflexible, but I wonder if that was actually good for the movement itself, just because there was that
everything Swiss era looked the same, and then you this is like a quiz.
It's back in school.
The reaction to it. So computers actually forced a big breakaway from that. And if you look at the work from David Carson, and I forget the other guy that he worked with, but the ray gun aesthetic from the day, and it was David Carson setting an article in a magazine on wingdings because he hated the article and it was written so terribly, just to insult the writer. I don't know. Pretty cool. It's
brazen.
Pretty interesting to me.
Cool.
I love that. I saw him do a great talk in New York in 2019. Old David Carson. Super funny guy. Such boldness. I just felt like with doing something like that, but there were other campaigns that he was just kind of flicking through, doing stuff for Macallan or maybe even a luxury car brand. And he was like, yeah, I showed them this. They didn't like it, And then he's just, next slide, he was so calm and cool. And I just thought, I've seen that, I think, in a few designers, and maybe you have a story about that too, of just, you've got to have a brazenness about you at times, or a boldness about your work and about your craft. And it has been pitched to someone many times, and they might not like it.
If you're on the more art side of the spectrum versus like a product, but like having a strong opinion matters. Actually, even a product design, like they want, when you're presenting ideas, they don't want like to the higher ups, right?
Mm-hmm.
They want to know what the solution is, not here's 5, choose. They're like, based on your expertise, your research, this and that, what is the one solution that's going to be right? Now you might go through multiple, obviously, with yourself, maybe with your like manager, and hopefully you do. But like when it's time to go up, this is the right solution, and this is,
conviction.
With it. You've already tested the things that don't work, so you're like, okay, we had 3 choices. Yeah. This was the best one.
Well, it might even be you might have done some qual, but like this is even going to something that hasn't been tested necessarily. You'll use quant to then test it. When it's live, A/B test it,
Yeah. You're picking a direction in a way.
Yeah, but you're like, we think that, and you're going to have alignment ideally with your PM, so you have like this tight little story. This is the right thing. It's going to do this.
It's a fine line, I think, being bold and having conviction versus having a flexibility to be open to new ideas too.
You don't want to be like, I bet David Carson was a nightmare to work with.
There you go. That's the trade-off.
Steve Jobs too, right? Like Steve Jobs was known for being a total asshole, but he also he had such a strong vision, and he didn't want anybody to mess with it. So I can see why
it manifests in a totally different way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're not there yet. We're not Steve Jobs, unfortunately, yet. So until then, we're going to have to get along with others.
He's got to buy the t-shirt, the turtleneck, and then just, the rest will follow. Wear it and it will come.
All right.
Yeah.
Check back here in 2 weeks' time. I'll see if I've got myself a fucking turtleneck.
Be raging.
Mock turtleneck,
yeah. Well, I love that. That was a good question, Erica. Thanks for.
I have one last question that I love to ask.
Cool.
Is there any like cool tool or plugin or app that you're like super obsessed with or use every day?
Just the obvious ones, and actually someone further up in the thread was like, how do we think AI is going to affect our agency? And I use a lot of the AI tool. Everyone's going to say this, but I really have switched a lot from Google to using Perplexity as like my answer generating machine. And I use ChatGPT in a lot of different ways. A lot of people do, but I'll like train it to write in a certain persona that can either reflect what I'm doing. So when I'm just spitballing ideas with it, it's sort of responding back in a way that feels more like me, and it helps me be more concise. So I've like sort of tuned that. Even in ChatGPT, I have like whole things like where it's just like chef talk, and I don't go to like recipe sites. I just have conversations with it about ideas I have, because I do a lot of cooking, and they stole. I'm sure they stole the data from every cookbook that's ever existed.
Yeah,
it's pretty good. So tools that are really like Midjourney has been great. So what goes in the squares? Doing like some 404, all these pages, and like I know they don't have good stock or their own great assets, so I just like created a really cool set of images to use in a couple spaces with Midjourney that'll have a bit more of a concept behind them. I think I haven't played with it yet, but I want to. But Cursor AI, which is it helps you write code if you've never written.
Wow.
Deployable, and it's apparently really amazing. Like kids making interactive, games in 3JS, and 8-year-olds, have never coded anything.
Prompting it. Yeah.
Wow.
And would you use that, do you think, in your agency setting in Siberia right now, for example? Could you see use cases? Yeah.
ChatGPT I use daily for
Yep.
work stuff.
Yep.
My wife uses it, even though she's not allowed to, so I'll leave out where she works. But like, especially for like different, and I do use it in different ways. Like if it's boring writing that you don't, kind of things you don't want to do.
Yep.
I use ChatGPT a ton when I was at Slice during performance review season. You know, I want all of the reviews from the team of 10 to like sort of sound the same and have the same tonality and be as concise as possible. So I use it for just synthesizing my notes and turning them into a report that I sort of, and I give it like the structure of that report. And like, I don't know, big fan.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is awesome. All right. AI tools. They're helpful. They're coming. Love it. Thanks. I think we're at time anyway. I mean, that kind of flew by, but I love these are great questions, Erica. Yeah, please everyone connect with Dave on exclusively on X, right? No, just kidding. LinkedIn as well. Available on all platforms now. Definitely check out the work of Siberia. It sounds like there's some really interesting stuff coming up. I went to the site the other day. It's looking great, but yeah, I know that in the agency landscape, the client work always comes first too. So sometimes the in-house site is last to get updated. But yeah, it sounds like there's some really cool stuff coming out. So I hope when those things launch, you could maybe share something on your LinkedIn or something similar that these things have gone out, because I'd love to check it out. Some of yours and the team's work.
Cool. This was super fun.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
You did. Yeah, you did. Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to hit end stream now. Cheers.
All right. Thanks, y'all.
All right. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Oh,
And
wait,
you
where's
can
the
start.
live?
Oh, it's still ending.
Oh, wait, is it? Here, I'll end stream.